Good afternoon. Thanks for coming on and for joining us for this presentation. I'm joined by Edith. I'm Donna Steinfeld. I'm Senior Associate Director for Advising Services at ISSS. And basically, we're going to be discussing today different alternatives at Penn beyond the J1 and the H1B status. So we're going to be focusing on those alternatives that you may use to either short-term hire individuals or bringing them on for more permanent stays here at Penn. Edith, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Edith Chung. I'm one of the IS advisors, and I'm really glad to have everyone here today.
All right, so we're going to get started, and Edith is going to start the presentation, and then I will jump in a little bit.
All right. So we have many different alternative immigration status other than the J and H's that we know and frequently use. There's OPT/STEM OPT for F1 students. There's TN, there's E3, visitors B1, B2, O1, and then permanent residency. We're going to go by them one by one. Next, please. All right, so OPT for international student, usually after their graduation, there's pre-completion OPT as well, but we're not talking about it today. Post-completion OPT is optional practical training for F1 students who have completed their program that is OPT eligible. They will apply for the initial OPT, which is up to 12 months. They Sometimes some people have used pre-OPT and that will deduct time from their post-completion OPT. But they're supposed to know this and they should consult their F1 sponsor institution about how many months exactly they are left for their post-completion OPT. The employment must be related to their field of study. And for some people, their programs are eligible for STEM OPT extension that is 24 months. They will need to apply for the STEM OPT extension towards the end of their post-completion OPT, but the application must be received by USCIS before the OPT end date. So as employer, you will need to complete the Form I-983 training plan with this student. It will be a employer-employee relationship between you and the employee slash international student that will be hired by us. It will have some attestations and reporting and needs to be a paid position and needs to be for a e-verified employer and it must be more than 20 hours per week. So it cannot be a part-time. Maybe it's not full like 35 or 40 hours, but it must be more than 20 hours per week. Next, please. So, when students are, let's say they are Penn student, when they are current student, they are eligible for on-campus employment. But from the day after their program end date list on their I-20, they no longer eligible for on-campus employment because they're no longer a current student. They will have to have additional work authorization such as OPT for any employment, no matter it's for Penn or for any other institutions. This is a benefit for F1 students and the record technically and recommendation and reporting management, they're all managed by the F1 sponsoring institution. For example, if someone is a Penn student, they graduated from Penn and then will work at Penn, their entire thing will be managed by Penn and Penn will still update their let's say civis record about the OPT employment and stuff. But here, if student graduate from Princeton but work at Penn, all of their F1 student records still need to be managed by Princeton. And for F1 related immigration inquiry, it must be handled by Princeton. Penn can hire student use their EAD card, but they still should report and consult their status back in their school. Next, please. And for STEM OPT, F1 student will still remain under sponsoring school sponsorship. Let's say they still graduated from Princeton and worked at Penn. For OPT, their status is managed by Princeton. For STEM OPT, they're still managed by Princeton. They will need to continue maintaining the student's civics record and do the reporting requirements. But for the employer, we will need to complete the Form I-983 training plan. The form will be a collective effort by the employee and the employer, need to be signed by those who has direct knowledge of the employee's training objectives and or has signatory authority. And the e-verification requirement means the student under STEM OPT must work for a e-verified employer. For Penn's e-verified name and employer, we would suggest students to contact Penn Employee Solution Center. And there is this website, or you can search in Google study in the States, I-983. There will be a whole website about the I-983 form, what student needs to do and what employer needs to do and what employers like responsibility by completing this form. It could be some helpful information. Next, please. And we have TN. This is like based on an agreement between the US, Mexico, and Canada, replacing the North American Free Trade Agreement. So TN only applies for citizens of Canada or Mexico. Um, we can't really click on the link here, but if you search the Code of Federal Regulations list of the professional occupations, there's this list contains all the jobs that can be done under TN and the minimum qualifications. So Mexican citizens will need to obtain a visa. They can obtain a visa in the U.S. Embassy in Mexico and then come in as a TN. But Canadian citizens are generally eligible for admission as non-immigrant without a visa. So they can take the required document, exit, and re-enter and be admitted at border as a TN. So the initial period of stay is up to 3 years. We can extend indefinitely every 3 years, technically speaking, but since this is still a temporary status, the longer we extend it, the harder it might be, and the more likely it can be questioned. So the TNE form request will be submitted through IPEN. We will move that to iHub in the future, but you can still use IPEN for now. Employee will need to apply at the consulate for their visa if they're a citizen of Mexico, or at the border if they are citizens of Canada. Or ISSS can prepare a change of status or extension of stay and submit this from within the US. But applying abroad is generally quicker and cheaper, even for the Mexican citizens who need to actually visit a US embassy and get a visa, then come back. And the CBP officer will determine the admissibility. If this link is still not clickable, so you can maybe search TN on our website. The new website search function is so much better, and that will give you the website with more TN information, including fee schedule. Next, please. And there's E3 for Australian tradie workers. So that's 2 years. Start with 2 years, and then we may extend it indefinitely every 2 years. And also the same since it's a temporary status. And as you can see, it does not allow dual intent, which is not immigration intent. The longer we extend that, the harder it might be, and the more likely it will be questioned. Because if you extend too long, then it might not be temporary. It is available to citizens of Australia. It has some qualifications as H-1B. And the dependents of E3 may apply for employment authorization with USCIS. So for obtaining E3 status, they can either visit a consulate or ISSS can prepare a change of status or extension of stay from within the US. There's can be premium processing, and the fee is listed on the website. So yeah, next please. Yes, and the department also submit the request form for E3 employment in IPEN will be moved to iHub in the future. IS Advisor will prepare LCA if they decide to go counselor, or full petition filing if we do change of status or extension of stay. And if necessary, employees travel also back to Australia and apply for the visa. Once obtained that, they will come back and begin the employment at Penn. There's definitely internal and filing fees with USCIS applicable. Yeah, and searching E3 on our website will pull out the website with all the information. Next, please. And then there's visitors, B1, B2, or CWB, WT, ASTA. So B1 is usually for business, and B2 is for pleasure or say tourist. Um, so foreign nationals apply for this visa without Penn sponsorship. So we Penn ISSS will not submit documentations or prepare much stuff because they're not sponsored by Penn. And as the same for nationals of certain countries, they also have the same restrictions as B visa. So the purpose of the B visa is for business or pleasure, means it is not a work visa. So they can consult with business associate in the US, they can attend conventions, meetings, conference, seminars, but not receive a salary from a US source of services rendered in the US. They can um, receive honorarium from Penn in certain conditions if their stay at Penn is no longer than 9 days and they have not received honorarium from more than 5 institutions or organization over the last 6 months. So since this is like still some sort of payment, we would recommend you consult Penn's Division of Finance and ISSS in advance because if it's like longer than 9 days or something, maybe we need to look into another option. And search B1, B2, or search business on our website. We'll pull out the information page about B1, B2 and the information we can provide. Next, please. All right, Donna.
Okay, so I'm just going to take over from here. And the first thing I'm going to discuss is the O1. So the O1 is an alternative we may have for employees being sponsored by Penn. So it is a case where we are petitioning on behalf of an individual who is going to meet certain criteria. So the beneficiary looking at the O1 eligibility is that they possess extraordinary ability. In our cases, it's usually going to be sciences or education. You know, they have national, international acclaim. There is going to be that they are recognized within their field. There's going to be a lot of evidence and documentation that is going to be required as part of this process, and that they're working in this area of which they have the extraordinary ability. So it's something that, this individual is going to be meeting certain criteria. So, like, to look at it is basically, so looking at that, the specifically what made to be made. So, either they may have a major award, such as the Nobel Prize, or which we have in most cases, they're meeting at least three of the following eight criteria. So it could be awards. So have they received, national, international awards? Their excellence has been shown. Are they members of different association that, their achievements allow them to become a member? Are they publishing in trade publications? Is there coverage? Is there media coverage about, their background or their research on this beneficiary. Do they serve as a judge or review works from others, whether they're on a panel or they're doing it individually? Original scientific scholarly contributions that have major significance. Are they publishing? Do they have articles? How many publications do they have out there? Um, what are their roles? What is their salary? Are they commanding a high salary or have commanded a high salary? So at least three of these eight criteria have to be met for an O1 to be considered. So, how is it determined? How does the process start? Again, it's still something in IPEN, not yet in iHub. This case is going to be going to our outside legal counsel. So it is something that, once we open the case, we are going to be sending it to the law firm for any of the documents, for any type of call that is done that is going to discuss, the options. They'll review the information. Do they determine that this individual meets the criteria? How strong a case is it? It's a fairly complex process and something that you want to make sure if you think you may be sponsoring someone for an O1 that you're doing, 3 to 6 months in advance. There's a lot of processing time that goes into it because it is a very in-depth, complex case. So, that is definitely something that is going to be, planned for, reviewed. It does allow the initial application that is submitted, it is for 3 years, but unless there's some type of significant change, it is only 1 year extensions going further. So an O1 is indefinite. So we could be, an O1, sometimes there's individuals that are doing year after year doing extensions. So that's not unheard of. It is something that at Penn is the petitioner for this. We are doing this process. We don't have, for example, agents. The employee can't do this on their own. Some of the benefits of it is sometimes there's individuals who are subject to the 2 year home residency requirement. That's part of the J1, and they can't get that waived. The O1 may be an alternative for those individuals because they can become O1 and travel and come back to get that status. Another thing we see with the H-1B is someone who maybe exhausted their H-1B time. So they may have come up to the 6 years, have no other option, and no might be something to consider when that individual is in that final year, and you want to keep them here, but there's no other option to extend their H. Another thing we are seeing increasing in O1s for individuals coming from possibly, if they're coming from outside the US, as you know, the $100,000 fee for the H-1B does not apply to the O1. So that is something that we're also seeing an increase in O1s. But again, there has to be enough time built in and the person has to be eligible. And that eligibility, again, is determined by the outside counsel. Um, Same as the H-1B, there is the return of cost of transportation home if they are dismissed before the O1 is expires. So I've discussed the outside counsel a little bit. So kind of bridging between the O1 and the permanent residence information is that these are the two law firms that we work. They've been vetted and they handle all of our O1s as well as all of our employment-based permanent residence cases. So Goldblum, Collins and Dennis and Clasco Immigration Law Partners. That website at the bottom is where you can get a lot more detail on this process. But in the case of the O1, as well as the green card and permanent residence processes, we're providing, once we initiate a case with them, we are providing the individual's CV, information on the position that they're coming to do or they're doing at Penn. And usually what is set up is a review determining the case. And then once a case is started, there's usually initial consultation and determining what are the options? Which way can we proceed? What are they eligible for? Especially when looking at the permanent residencies, we'll go over different paths that Penn can sponsor for, and a lot of it will be based on that individual. How long have they been, in the field? What are their qualifications? Perhaps their country of birth may determine what path may be, more maybe quicker versus going down another path, or when we want a time to do this application. So that is something that we'll go through again. Also, a very, more in-depth, complicated process handled at the outside counsel level. So, as I mentioned, these are the different employer-based permanent residency options at Penn, and I will go into a little bit more detail on these. And again, they're processed by our outside legal counsel program, the two law firms that I mentioned. So, how to get one started? So, again, not yet in iHub. It's but eventually the PRE form you can submit to begin permanent residency once you're in the individual's IPEN case. There is a policy which I will go to into more detail in a following slide, but there is a policy 119 that prohibits sponsorship of staff positions. This is a case that is initiated with ISSS and then open with one of the law firms that's selected by the department and or the individual. You'll let us know which law firm you'll want to pursue, and either myself or my colleague Chi Wei will kind of be the ISSS liaison in these cases. So what'll happen depending on the case will depend on kind of the level of involvement of the department or the individual. And then all of the applicable legal and filing fees, all invoices will be directed to the department. So I mentioned policy 119, and basically that is a human resources policy where we don't sponsor staff for permanent residents unless an exception is granted. And there is a committee that does review these. It's not done by ISSS. This committee is, when the IPEN and the e-form is initiated, there is a letter that we request is uploaded. And it's going to have these main points that are covered. Basically, how unique the skills required for this position. Has it been verified there's no qualified workers that would be able to find, in the US job market? It's going to list all the position, its nature, why is this person uniquely qualified? So it's going to have the statement that's provided that the committee will review and determine if we can move forward with a permanent residence case. And then there also is going to be some basic criteria as well, is that, this is a current staff member, they're full time, they've passed any type of introductory period. Again, their unique proprietary skill set, um, and that this position requires that you can't find U.S. applicants, and that the staff member possesses the proprietary skills that make them uniquely qualified. So this will be a process that will be vetted by the committee that handles that, and then once they approve whether or not we can move forward, then ISSS will initiate the law firm if we get the approval of the exception. So let's say, so whether it's, we got the approval or it's currently, a position for which we sponsor, these are the four pathways that you're going to see come up in the permanent residence cases. One of the ones that's, fairly common for those that are more established in the field, they have a record of publications and research, and, they're considered more exceptional, um, is the outstanding professor researcher. And that usually is required at least 3 or more years of experience in teaching and research. Experts are going to attest to their background, and award winning. So that's going to be the one category that could be pursued. The second one is one that is for individuals who have teaching as part of their positions. They've been advertised that they're in teaching roles, and there is a little bit more of a straightforward, less it's more like these are the specifics. They just have to show they're the most qualified, the best qualified, not that there's no US workers. And this is something called perm, the special recruitment. And definitely a good option. Department of Labor has been taking very, very long on these processes, so it hasn't been as great an option as perhaps in the past, but there is an 18-month deadline to get to a step in the process where we're filing a special recruitment, what they call a perm application with Department of Labor, and there is an 18-month deadline from time of selection. So if you have anyone that you have any new hires, new teaching, whether it's a new assistant professor that's coming on board, someone with teaching duties, you want to start this process as soon as they are hired, because there is a deadline. And if this option works for the individual, it is again a pretty straightforward option, but it is very time sensitive. And again, the timing is not as conducive as it maybe was a few years ago. Another option that involves Department of Labor, it's more what they call labor certification for advanced degree holders. The thing about this is that there is going to be a lot of recruitment. Um, there's going to be different requirements in regards to the ads. There's going to be, again, prevailing wage, Department of Labor determining a prevailing wage for this position. But unlike the special recruitment for teaching positions, this would require that there's no qualified US workers are available. And that's why it's so important going back to the policy 119, because if there is a qualified US worker that applies as part of the recruitment that happens, it ends the whole process. So no matter how far, once that happens, we can't go forward. So that's why it's so important that we are really consciously determining which cases that we should pursue, especially for this labor certification, because that would end no matter how far we've gotten. Once that happens, the process would end. The next thing, and this has become more and more, and it's very similar, kind of sometimes you'll see it in conjunction with option one, the outstanding professor researcher, but it might not raise to the same qualifications level, but it does not have to go through the labor certification process. It's called the National Interest Waiver. This can be employer sponsored, and also individuals can do this self-sponsorship as well, but this is an option to do employer sponsored. And again, advanced degree holders, people of exceptional ability, and basically it's establishing that that work benefits the national interests and the crucial nature of that individual's contributions. Okay, so that is in the process, and I've just been mentioning not an iHub, not an iHub yet. Trilby Suite, which is also named iHub, is currently where you submit any of the H-1B applications, and a lot of the processes we talk to will eventually be transitioned, but right now it's just the H. But I just wanted to give you kind of for anyone who's not yet gone into Trilby, also known as iHub, this is kind of a page to give you an idea. And it is something that will, eventually transition all of our cases to. But to give you a little context why I keep mentioning it. Okay. So what we will do is we will open it up to questions. And I'm just going to go ahead, and if you want to copy this, and if you would love to, we're definitely open to feedback. Anything that we can improve on this, we'll do this presentation usually once a semester. And that way, hopefully this will help us out. And just to give you also some of our where you can follow us. We encourage everyone, to sign up for the newsletter, follow us, especially on Instagram, Facebook as well. And that is going to conclude the official part of our presentation. I'm going, and we can definitely open it up. If you want to put in the chat, or you can unmute and open your video if you want to ask questions directly. Edith and I are here for you. Okay, I see something in the chat. Okay, so the question is the TN an appropriate option for a visiting scholar transitioning from OPT? Not sure what the research assistant title entails. Thanks. So it could possibly, it could possibly be an option if they're being hired they're on OPT and they're continuing employment, or they're a new person that we're bringing in. The research assistant, it isn't very clear, but if they're doing, research, or if you go through that occupation list and um, review it, you're going to be submitting a request to us, so we could also like review and see if that seems to be a fit. But I would say reach out to us if you have a specific case. You could reach out to Chiwe directly, who oversees all of the cases, and she could review it for you. But it's very possible that if they're going to be in a research capacity, they may, be able to do the TN if they're a Canadian or Mexican citizen. Any other questions? I hope this is a good sign that this was comprehensive. But, and just so everyone knows, you can always reach out to us if anything comes up afterwards. We appreciate your time, especially as, during this time. Um, we just want to make sure that everyone knows that there's multiple options out there. And hopefully you're getting any of our announcements. If there's ever any updates or anything like that, we will make sure to put it on our website, as well as send out anything that would affect everyone by email.
Yeah, and also I've seen many of you join virtual drop-ins talking to us. We have the virtual drop-in like about 2 to 3 virtual drop-ins, is right, Donna? Two
Yeah.
to three virtual drop-ins every day, Monday through Friday. And there's advising meeting. So, and also we have phone number, we have the contact e-form. So there are definitely multiple ways to reach out to us, or just like pay us a visit upstairs McDonald's.
Yep. And just, and you can always, when you look at our advising page, you can see um who has H, who has green, like permanent resident, like who you can see specifically. So you may want to not say target, but like go to, to those individuals. But if you have a specific case, you're working with someone, you can always reach out to that individual directly to set something up as well. All right. But thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the day. And thanks again for joining.